What unlocks when we learn that AI agents actually get more reliable when humans are not approving every move? Giving a model tools to run and check economic code lifted success from 74 to 96% for just 8 cents more. The checkpoint was slowing work the agent could independently test and then, when necessary, repair. So here's the claim I'll stand behind. The safer system may indeed be the one allowed to decide more for itself, because a system better able to test outcomes, much like humans do when learning new things, is far more efficient than constantly requesting permission before being allowed to try at all. That's today's lead. Also in today's episode, Apple is testing a supplier who Washington is pushing against, US apps obscure whose model sits underneath, and workers ask why AI has not returned their time. Come with me, let's get into it. Claude Code users will soon, by default, have an agent acting inside their working folders without asking before every step. Now, we do know that a bad edit can still wreck an afternoon. We've seen that before. So what decides when the agent does have to actually stop and ask? Anthropic's answer is consequence. Starting August 14th, Auto Mode becomes the default for Pro, Max, and Team subscribers. Claude Code writes, runs, and edits code inside a user's work environment. And under Auto Mode, it keeps moving until an action could cause damage that's actually hard to undo. It still pauses before destructive or irreversible steps, and it also pauses before reaching outside the user's immediate environment. Anthropic first offered this as an optional test back in March, and now it's removing the small approval boxes that appear between ordinary actions. The company says that users already approve 97% of those prompts anyway. That makes the ritual look a lot like a driver tapping yes at every green light. Anthropic also studied 1,053 paying testers, and the company reported that Auto Mode's own screening caught 89% of harmful actions. Human review caught 13.6% only. Now, those are Anthropic's figures, gathered and presented by the company that, of course, benefits from users trusting Auto Mode. So, of course, take that with this news. A lab can choose the test, define the harm, and then decide which results become public. That is what we're seeing happen here. But still, an independent piece of evidence did land alongside this rollout as well, and it does make Anthropic's case much stronger. A new National Bureau of Economic Research working paper tested models on economic coding. That simply means writing software for economic and statistical analysis. The researchers compared a basic assistant with a constrained agent. The agent received the tools, the working folder, and the permission to simply run and check its own code. Success jumped from 74% to 96%. The extra cost of this was only about 8 cents per run. Now, that is a huge gain for almost no extra money. And the most revealing part came when the researchers tried careful examples and detailed prompting. Those prompts helped the basic assistant a lot, but they barely did anything for the agent. The agent didn't need humans to describe every intermediate move. It could try something, inspect the result, correct the mistake, and then keep going. Differences between 3 common coding languages also nearly vanished once the model could simply run its own work. So as an example, let's picture a musician tuning by ear. Written instructions can explain which way to turn the peg, but the faster route is simply hearing the note and adjusting it directly. This is why the human checkpoint is moving as well. Trust comes from checking what happened wherever that checking sits. A person clicking approve without closely examining each action provides less protection than an automated screen that watches its own result. Anthropic is also adding prompt injection screening and rules that users can set to block certain actions completely if they wish. And it's not like the company is opening every gate either. In another example, they are now allowing Fable 5 to respond to basic biological prompts, but they are still keeping potentially dangerous virology, toxicology, and molecular design requests to the restricted path. But even so, it's becoming very clear that the more useful pattern is that ordinary coding mistakes should be caught and reversed by the same agent with room to move and to catch those. Requests with consequences that can't be recalled do keep a harder boundary. So the agent gets to decide more because the surrounding system has become better at deciding when it must stop. What we get to watch now is whether independent testing confirms those safety figures and whether consequence-based limits spread beyond one company's coding agent. All right, from an agent deciding when to pause to Apple deciding which supply chain boundary to pursue in order to cut costs, as phone and laptop buyers are already paying higher prices due to the memory shortage. Why would Apple test chips from a supplier that US political leadership, including the White House, is urging it to avoid? Because the AI buildout has reached into the same parts bin used by almost every modern device. Apple is reportedly qualifying memory from Changshin Memory Technologies, or CXMT, for potential use in future iPhone and MacBook models. Now, what qualifying means is testing and certifying a supplier before buying from it at scale. Apple has also asked the White House to approve those chips for products sold inside China. The move surfaced on Sunday, 2 months after Apple raised some prices and pointed to memory costs as one reason. The scarce part here is working memory. It holds information while a laptop, a phone, or a server is using it. AI data centers need enormous amounts, and their demand is pulling supply away from the wider electronics market. 3 companies lead that supply line: SK Hynix, Samsung, and Micron. Previous reporting has Samsung expecting shortages through 2028, with much of its capacity already locked into long prepaid agreements. CXMT trails the leaders by roughly 2 to 3 chip generations. Apple testing its parts across major product lines tells you then how hard this shortage is pulling. A company famous for tight hardware standards is looking seriously at a slower supplier because the usual sources have become too scarce and too expensive. A bipartisan group of senators wrote in July discouraging this exact arrangement. They described CXMT as a national security concern. Dependence on a supplier in a rival country can create both leverage and political exposure. Apple already knows that tension from its broader manufacturing footprint in China, but a warning letter from senators cannot produce another memory chip. The demand curve will keep moving even if policy tries to hold the supply chain apart. And this shortage may end up weakening the concentration that caused the problem in the first place. CXMT went public in Shanghai in July, and its shares surged on their debut. That fresh money can build fabrication capacity and help the company close its technical gap faster, just like China is doing with the OpenAI gap as well. So AI demand is doing 2 things at once here. It's making memory more expensive today, and it's also financing a 4th serious supplier in a market that had narrowed to just 3. Apple's tests don't guarantee a purchase, of course. White House approval isn't guaranteed either. Yet, qualification itself is what turns a politically disfavored supplier into a practical option. And now we watch what the other device makers do. If they begin testing the same chips, then each approval will spread memory capacity across an ever wider field. The shortage pushing against the border may also build the supplier that makes the shortage easier to escape. All right, from scarce chips forcing a supply chain rethink over to cheap models forcing a software rethink. Americans are already using AI services without being told whose model sits underneath. Does the model's country of origin tell you what the service can do or what it should cost? Pinterest gave investors a striking answer to that question. On its August 4th earnings call, Pinterest chief executive Bill Ready said that the open models behind their AI features cost less than 8% of comparable closed systems from Anthropic and OpenAI. That includes a version of Alibaba's Qwen adapted using Pinterest's own data. Now, open weights, as you know, means that a company can download the model and run it on its own hardware. It also means that they can adapt it to teach the general model a company's particular work. In Pinterest's case, that work includes organizing and recommending content. Now, that 8% figure does come from Bill Ready himself speaking to his investors, so he has an obvious reason to present Pinterest as lean and efficient. The company also didn't provide an independent comparison proving equal performance on every task, but Pinterest has put these models into its products. That means whatever advantage might support the other 92% of the price isn't showing up as something that Pinterest specifically believes it must buy. But this is becoming more and more common. Yesterday's edition of the Century Report showed that the same pressure is coming from another direction as well. Rippling found an open model ran one workload 85% cheaper than a premium system with nearly identical output. And now White House committees are pressing American companies about this shift. DoorDash received a letter just last week. Airbnb and the coding company Cursor faced questions earlier. The letters treat reliance on Chinese origin open models as a concern. That concern runs into a basic property of open weights that once released, they are files. They are open. You cannot pull them back. A company can download them, adapt them, and run them locally. So a committee can ask where the code began, but it can't make every existing copy disappear. The public picture is also stranger than the political language even suggests. A June survey from Public First found that only 9% of US respondents trusted Chinese models, compared with 52% who trusted American ones. Yet most AI assistants decline to identify the model underneath. Kayak's Ask AI runs on OpenAI. Hilton's Planner runs on Claude Sonnet. A person using either service may never know that unless they actually go looking. So people are being asked how much they trust a national label that the interface often withholds. Meanwhile, the companies that are building those interfaces choose based on cost and performance. This diffusion broadens who can build capable systems. A smaller company no longer has to pay a Frontier Labs full premium to offer useful AI. It can begin with released weights and teach the model its own work. Now, there's still a strong case for transparent disclosure here. People should be able to see which system that they are dealing with, especially when a service handles sensitive information or makes consequential recommendations. When users can see it, they can judge the arrangement for themselves. But origin and capability are already coming apart. Open models move, adapt, and become part of products far from the place where they began. At less than 8% of the reported cost, that pull will be extremely hard to contain, and I don't think we would even want to. All right, from inexpensive models spreading through the products to the people expected to build and supervise them, workers inside AI companies report weeks running from 70 to 90 hours right now. Where did all the time that AI was supposed to save go? Upstream. Companies converted that capacity into more output. 4 years ago, a Google engineering director predicted that AI would deliver a 4-day workweek by 2025. OpenAI formally urged companies to test a shorter week without cutting pay. Anthropic has pointed to Claude working 7 hours without a break as evidence of what is coming. Meta says that AI is dramatically reshaping work. All of those are absolutely correct. The BBC found a very different week, though, inside those same firms when you go levels lower. Workers described frequent crisis meetings and routine weekend work. Some workers said that internal sprints at OpenAI and Anthropic can pass 90 hours across 7 days. And a former OpenAI employee said the company never even considered testing the shorter week that it was encouraging other employers to try. And that person also described the reviews as super cutthroat. So the forecast has always assumed that there was this fixed pile of work. You automate one day and people will get that day back. But a researcher gave the BBC correction very plainly. People assume that 20% less work means 4-day weeks, but new work emerges. A University of California, Berkeley study followed hundreds of workers at one U.S. technology company for 8 months. AI expanded their workloads. People did complete tasks faster, but then they had to take on more work, and they had to stay longer to check what the systems produced. That last part is becoming less and less needed, as mentioned in our earlier story, but the taking on more work is often expected. Now, an agent can run continuously, while the person responsible for it still often has a limited supply of attention. Every faster stream of output does create another stream that somebody might have to go and inspect. And some workers don't get to choose whether they even enter that stream. One Meta employee described being moved onto an AI team without consent. They just move you over, they said. You can't say no, or if you do, you have to quit. Amin Shali left Google back in May, and he said that the way AI changed his job damaged both his work and his health. Another worker put the broken promise in human terms. AI is supposed to be doing so much for us now, so many more people should at least have better health and better sleep. But that is not the reality, and I think we are looking in the wrong place as to the reason why. This is simply how it is when you are dealing with institutions whose whole purpose is to extract as much value as possible. There is no point where they say, okay, we're productive enough now. There's always pressure for more output, more growth, more return, whether people are doing the work on their own or with increasingly powerful AI tools. The idea that companies will just voluntarily turn those productivity gains thanks to AI into shorter work weeks? No, history gives us a pretty clear answer on that one. Even when leaders sincerely might make that promise, they run into the same incentive structure they always have. Once AI lets workers produce more, the company then has a choice: keep people working the same hours and capture more value, or actually reduce the hours and potentially hire more people in order to cover that work. Under a system built around quarterly returns and shareholder expectations, you can probably guess which option always wins. And that doesn't necessarily require some cartoonishly evil CEO, although of course there are some of those out there. The system itself rewards extraction. It rewards taking every new efficiency gain and turning it into more output rather than turning it into more sleep, better health, or time with the people that you care about. And then you have the other reality here. AI has a massive learning curve. This is the most disruptive technology in human history by a huge margin. That disruption can be profoundly positive, and I think it will be. It can unlock extraordinary benefits, it can solve problems that we've struggled with for generations, and it can expand what people are even capable of doing. But positive disruption is still disruption. And AI is not only the most disruptive advancement of all time, it is also being implemented and changing things at an unprecedented pace that nobody can keep up with. That combination is impossible in the face of extractive systems. They do not work together. Constant change is the baseline now. We are not heading towards some comfortable point where the new technology stabilizes, everybody learns the tools, and we get settled into a new normal. There is no plateau. AI keeps improving, the frontier keeps moving, and the rate of change itself keeps accelerating. So any company trying to even stay profitable in such a situation is going to feel compelled to chase that edge. They're going to feel pressure to throw more resources at AI, to retrain faster, to automate faster, to produce faster, and to keep pace with competitors who are all doing the exact same thing. It is pedal to the metal for everyone all the time. That is the reality when you are dealing with institutions whose whole purpose is to extract as much value as possible. And that is why AI productivity alone will not give us work-life balance, not under a system where every efficiency gain immediately becomes an argument for extracting more. The only way that these gains turn into more rest or more health or better, more worthy pursuits, more time to actually live, is if we make a different choice of system. And here's the thing, AI may be disruptive enough not just to change how we work inside extractive capitalism, but also to challenge the extractive system itself. Extraction is built around taking labor, taking time, taking resources, and taking value, and concentrating the gains at the top. That is what it is designed to do. It produces abundance for some people alongside deprivation for others, because the system is not structured around making sure everyone has enough, it is structured around making sure somebody can always get more. What AI potentially offers is something different, the possibility of a generative system. A system that is oriented around creating rather than extracting, creating knowledge, creating access, creating capacity, and yes, creating material abundance, and then actually distributing the benefits of that abundance so people can all live fuller lives. And to be clear, that outcome is not automatic. The biggest actors in frontier AI right now are those who sit squarely at the very top of the extractive system and clearly have plans to use it to stay there, which in my view leads to perpetual dystopia. AI can just as easily become the most powerful extraction tool that we have ever built if we leave the existing incentives in place. But even if that's where the capability is concentrated now, we are also seeing it unlock massive gains everywhere else as well. Outside of the extractive system, we have never seen more progress in open systems explicitly capable of benefiting everyone and equalizing advantages. AI absolutely can perpetuate extraction, but it is also the greatest opportunity in history to build something better. It is the first advancement that is disruptive enough to create a real opening for a different kind of system altogether. In the current extractive system, the company holds the power to decide whether saved time becomes rest, higher pay, fewer hours, or just another faster deadline. Workers absorb the extra checking and the longer day. AI didn't choose the 90-hour workweek. The ownership structure did, doing what they always do, concentrating the benefits at the top. AI is exposing the flaw of this arrangement and the solution more than anything else ever has before now. Yes, the capability makes the task quicker to do, but the business arrangement decides who receives that freed time. Right now, firms racing for position can capture the gain before workers ever feel the benefit. And like I said, and like some of today's and many of the other stories that we cover here shows, that capture does not have to remain securely only at the top forever. As increasingly capable systems become cheap enough for individuals or a small team or a cooperative to operate independently, then companies lose their exclusive leverage over what to do with the benefits of the productivity gain. The 4-day workweek was never going to arrive as some gift from the companies who are trying to attain the extractive status quo. But it does become possible, and so much more becomes possible when those companies are no longer able to stop this increasingly capable technology from doing what it's already doing naturally, placing more and more capability and leverage into the hands of everyone it reaches. All right, closing out for today. The agent is already deciding. Claude Code will decide which action comes next by default, while firm boundaries still stop it, though, before consequences become destructive or irreversible. Apple is deciding that a politically difficult supplier may be easier to accept than a memory shortage. Pinterest is deciding that a downloaded model can do the job without paying the closed system premium. And workers are living with decisions made above them. When AI saves time, their employers can turn that time into rest or another round of work, and so far, they've chosen the second. And that brings us back to the checkpoint. A checkpoint earns its place when it prevents harm. Anthropic's rollout here is suggesting that clicking approve on almost every reversible coding action wasn't really doing much of that. Execution and automated checking produced better results. The labor story has a different checkpoint. Workers have limited power to stop an employer from converting every gain into more output. That boundary needs more human control because the consequences land on their bodies and their lives and honestly on our future. But the hopeful motion does run through all 4 of today's stories. Capability is getting cheaper, spreading farther, and becoming easier to verify. The memory market is gaining more serious suppliers. Open models are cutting costs by more than 90% in Pinterest's account and everywhere else too. Agents can lift task successes for pennies. As those capabilities leave the handful of institutions that once held them exclusively, more people get to set the terms around their use. Whether an agent can act without asking for permission for every step is already settled. That future has arrived. What remains open now is who sets the limits, who can check the result, and who gets the time and the value and the future that AI is currently helping us create. See you tomorrow.